How do you survive an affair? How do you survive an intimate act of betrayal? Something that cuts your heart out, something that makes you feel, as a human being, superfluous, secondary, rejected, outdated, that someone's better than you. And when that happens, and the person guilty of the betrayal is the closest person in the world to you, the person that established your uniqueness, your husband, your wife, someone who said before God that you would be the one and the only, someone who made that declaration before all your family and friends, in front of your parents, for goodness sake, and now there was someone else, few things hurt as much. I once saw a statistic that said that short of, God forbid, the death of a parent, experiencing the infidelity of a spouse is life's most painful experience. Nothing hurts as much, and it's very hard to get past it. Let me just tell you statistically again how hard it is to get beyond that kind of betrayal. Firstly, studies show that if it's the wife who's having the affair, then usually 2/3 of the time the marriage ends. 2/3. If conversely it's the husband who's having the affair, then 2/3 of the time the marriage often survives. Only 1/3 of acts of infidelity on the part of husbands leads to divorce. Now, some might say that that's classical sexism. The wife is seen as contaminated, the wife is seen as impure, or the husband can't believe that he has to share his wife sexually with another man, therefore husbands are much more unforgiving. That may be true. I'm not denying that sexism is involved in that statistic. But it could also be true that wives don't just have affairs that are one-night stands. Studies show that usually if a woman is having an affair, she becomes much more psychologically and emotionally involved, so that her act of infidelity can often be an entire relationship. How's the marriage going to survive that? Which leads me to this very important point. Infidelity and adultery destroy marriages not because they are sins of commission. The marriage often ends not because you have done something wrong, although you have done something wrong. Usually the marriage survives because of a sin of commission. You have failed to do something right. A marriage is like a stomach. It needs to be fed constantly. It needs to be fed love and sex and attention and compliments and focus and shared experiences. And if you're taking all of that and diverting it to somebody else, the marriage dies the death of starvation. Your marriage becomes a parched desert. There's no love to irrigate it because it's been diverted somewhere else. You've built a dam and now the river is running somewhere else. What you're left with is a parched desert. So adultery is wrong for two reasons. First and foremost, it's a tremendous betrayal. It's a sin. It's engaging in deception, fraudulence, and you are a liar. On the other hand, the reason it destroys marriages is because of how little you are now contributing to your marriage as your lover or your sexual partner becomes the focus of your desire. Can you forgive adultery? The answer is, it depends. Once I was speaking to a woman who told me that she had terminated her marriage over her husband's infidelity. And I asked her why. And she said to me, because it changed how I looked at him and how I looked at myself. Before he was unfaithful, I looked at him as someone who was totally devoted to me, and it made me feel special. After he committed adultery, I looked at myself as inadequate, someone who could not sustain her husband's attention and affection, and I looked at him as someone who could not provide me what I needed. So it was that mental change that made it impossible for her to continue. Paradoxically, however, this is one of the reasons that marriages often can continue past an act of infidelity. A husband who cheats on his wife can show his wife extravagant affection and real repentance and real remorse for what he has done. If you want to keep your marriage together and you're a man after you have cheated, then you must undergo the famous Maimonidean, the great rabbi from Spain and Egypt, the Maimonidean steps of repentance. Number one, you need to acknowledge that what you've done is wrong. Stop justifying it. You didn't commit adultery because your wife denied you sex. You didn't commit adultery because she was mean to you. You committed adultery because you chose to engage in deception, fraudulence, and lying. Take full responsibility. Number two, you must confess what you've done. One of the things that spouses suffer through when they discover that their spouse has been unfaithful is imagining what happened. No, you need to say what happened. Without going into deep detail, I don't believe in that. But in general, yes, we had a sexual relationship. Yes, we met approximately 10 times. Yes, I broke your heart. Yes, I did something terrible. And I could not be more sorry, which leads us to number 3, acts of restitution, things that make it better. And you know what that means in the context of a marriage? Extravagant love, going out of your way. If you were a husband who gave your wife a few compliments, or who maybe never cheated but watched pornography or looked at other women when you were with your wife and then you were unfaithful, if you want to keep your marriage together, you actually have to go to the opposite extreme. You can't look at other women anymore, not sexually anymore. You can't be distracted when you go out to dinner. You can't be half engaged when you make love to your wife. You can't be half romantically focused. You have to go the whole way to win her back, to show her that you're a changed man, which leads to the 4th act of repentance, which is charting a new course for the future, behaving differently. Don't be alone with women. Don't put yourself in a situation where you might cheat. Don't make your wife feel that she has to police you and monitor you and be suspicious of you. That's not fair. A wife should not have to resort to being a cop, even though sometimes I say that wives should be when they're given no choice, but they should be given the choice. Don't put yourself in a situation where you have to resist temptation. What about a wife's infidelity? What if it's the woman who's been unfaithful? Men find this very hard to forgive because they kind of know instinctually that their wives get attached to the men that they have affairs with, very emotionally attached. Here, the same acts of repentance apply, albeit applied slightly differently. Number 1, the wife has to come forward and say, yes, I was unfaithful, and I know I've broken your heart, and I'm begging for your forgiveness. I am sorry. There is no excuse for what I've done. I know I could easily say that I did it because our marriage wasn't good, or because you didn't give me attention, we weren't having sex, but those are excuses. And there are no excuses for what I've done, because I could have tried to repair our marriage, and I didn't. And instead, I took the easy way out. I took the liar's way out. And I cheated on you, and I cheated our marriage, and I cheated our children, and I'm sorry, and I'm begging your forgiveness. Number 2, confessing what happened. Don't make your husband have to imagine the things that were done. Don't go into the deepest details either. You have to find a healthy balance. That's one of the hardest things about going beyond infidelity. The cheated on spouse is going to want to know every last little detail, but the more they hear, the more they're going to imagine what happened, the less they're going to forgive. But you have to tell them, so you have to find the middle ground. Tell them in general without going into deep specifics, because you do have to get past this. Number 3, acts of restitution. Become an extravagantly loving wife. Focus exclusively on your husband. Make him feel that he's the one and the only. His ego will have been shattered by your act of unfaithfulness. Show that you only want to be around him. You want to travel with him. You want to talk to him. You want to make love to him. And finally, number 4, charting a new course forward. Change your life. Don't put yourself in situations where there's temptation around other men, where you need the attention of other men. And if that starts to happen in your marriage, that you feel neglected, express it, verbalize it, vocalize it. Go for counseling, but don't cheat. Adultery is too painful. It's too wrong. It destroys families. There's a reason why it's in the 10 Commandments. Not because God is seeking to punish us, because God seeks what is best for us. And what is best for us when our marriages are a little bit depleted and a little bit starving for affection or sex or whatever else people use as an excuse to go have an affair, it's time to fix the marriage, fix the relationship, and move on to a blessed life together.